Did you get the email?
Okay, please don't buy a ticket.
Can you just look better? I'm excited.
Nashville Design Week.
Nashville Design Week.
Nashville Design Week is a platform for bold collaborations and creative conversations that promotes idea sharing, engage and educate the public, and strengthen our city's design culture.
We shine a spotlight.
We shine a spotlight.
We shine a spotlight on designers who are shaping the city's future, and we facilitate critical conversation about the industry's growth and impact.
This year, we're checking in with our community to hear about what's going on.
What's going on?
We're sharing progressive breakthroughs, innovations in our practices, and fresh ideas. And we're setting some intentions for the future of design in our city.
Hey Nashville, what's new?
Hey Nashville, what's new?
Hey Nashville, what's new?
Hey you.
Hey, big
What's
guy.
new?
Thank you endlessly to our 2022 sponsors for helping us bring Nashville Design Week to life. Thank you to Platinum sponsor Design Public Group. Design Public Group takes the friction out of ancillary by connecting architects and designers to more than 500,000 of the highest quality products from more than 400 brands with the ability to easily search, sort, spec, share, and quote, all while fitting seamlessly into existing workflows. It's where great design is easy to find. Thank you for your generous sponsorship, and we look forward to partnering with you in the future. Thank you to our gold sponsor, Belmont University, O'Moore College of Architecture and Design, and Watkins College of Art. At Belmont University, we are carefully developing artists, architects, and designers to create a better world. Learn more about our trailblazing programs with the O'Moore College of Architecture and Design and Watkins College of Art. Thank you to our silver sponsors. Founding sponsor, Pfeffer to Road Architecture. Pfeffer to Road is a fellowship of principled architects and designers inspired by the story of their clients and the places that become their way of life. Founding sponsor, Gresham Smith. Gresham Smith is a full-service architecture, engineering, and design firm specializing in solutions for life's most essential infrastructure and institutions. Design Light and Acuity Brands. Design Light is Middle Tennessee's premier lighting representative for Acuity Brands and over 100 other manufacturers, working together to keep the design and construction communities current on the latest lighting technology and trends. And founding sponsor, Hastings. Hastings Architecture is a dynamic, nationally recognized architecture and interior design practice located in the heart of downtown Nashville. Thank you to our copper sponsors, Aberdeen Studio, ESA, Smith G Studio, Textures Nashville, founding sponsor, Interface, Tuck Hinton Architecture and Design, founding sponsor, Alfred Williams and Company, and Lithographics. Thank you to our bronze sponsors, founding sponsor, Circa Creative Studios, EOA Architects, Dryden Architecture and Design, Mesa, and Design Object. And thank you to our media partners, Nashville Interiors, Hi-Fi Media, Nashville Scene, Lightning 100, and Fortify Fabrication. And to our public relations partner, Allison Duke, and to our brand partner, Rex Runyon. Nashville Design Week is a nonprofit organization and an entirely volunteer effort made possible by the tireless dedication of our team. Now, let's get started. Well, good evening, everyone. We are so excited to be hosting this panel today, and so excited that you all decided to join us this early Thursday morning for this critical conversation that needs to be had in our design community. So welcome to Designing in Color, a conversation with designers of color that span regions and span ethnicities to gather insight from their experience and to determine how to move forward after this conversation is over. So I'm Emmanuel LeGrier, and I'm a co-director of programming here at Nashville Design Week, and couldn't be more excited to be witnessing this conversation today. And I'm going to introduce our speakers today and our moderator, and then I will get out of the way and let the conversation happen because I know that's why you are all here. So firstly, as I say your name, please just wave so that people know who you are. So Irene is an experienced designer and educator with a background in visual communication design and fine art. She has created intuitive user experiences for notable clients such as CVS Health, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and Infosys. Her career in art and design includes being a jewelry designer in corporate fashion and teaching design principles to high school students in the New York City public school system. She has had the privilege of teaching in the School of Design Strategies at Parsons School of Design as well. So thank you for joining us, Irene Inoue. So thank you. And she's joining us from the Boston and Rhode Island region. Next up, we have Mustafa Williams, is an associate and licensed architect at Gensler, Chicago. Born and raised in Nashville, Tennessee, Mustafa was inspired by the growth and development in the city in the early 2000s. This led him down the path of architecture, earning his professional Bachelor of Architecture from the University of Tennessee in 2018. After graduating, Mustafa joined Gensler Chicago full-time, working on projects on interior and group up architecture sales for the last 4 years. As a former ACE mentor, Nashville student, Mustafa is now a mentor and sits on the local associates board of ACE or ACE Chicago. To help increase the diversity in the architecture industry, Mustafa is also the professional development chair for the local National Organization of Minority Architects chapter, INOMA. Welcome, Mustafa, and thank you for joining us. Next up, we have Joe Gomez. Raised by 2 graphic designers, Joe Gomez is a filmmaker and writer who has traveled the world making documentaries, short films, and commercial work. Originally from the Bay Area, he has lived in the Nashville area for the last 14 years. Along with his obsession for miso ramen and sourdough bread, Joe loves adventuring and meeting people all over the world, but his best friends are his wife and their dog. So whenever possible, they come too. I love that, Joe. Thank you for joining us so much. Monforte Studio is a QWOC-owned studio that advocates through design. We empower underrepresented, and historically excluded communities through custom websites and authentic branding for entrepreneurs, creatives, and organizations that are invested in radical futures. Our founder, China, brings years of experience in the arts and custom Squarespace builds since 2017. Prior to founding Monforte Studio, China worked in the arts education sector with museums such as Los Angeles County Museum of Art, LACMA, and the Getty, and nonprofits like Self-Help Graphics and Artworks LA. So welcome, China Monforte. She is from the LA region. Thank you so much. And now I will introduce our moderator, and certainly last but not least, Shanice is a Nashville native and has always gravitated toward utilizing her creativity in various forms of art, design, and outreach. Her interest in architecture started as a child, crafting virtual neighborhoods in The Sims video game and attending youth design camps. Now, Shanice focuses her passion for design, community advocacy, and equity at Tuck Hinton Architecture and Design as a project coordinator. Her work embodies the delicate intersection of storytelling and community advocacy through the built environment. When she is not training for her first marathon or visiting the latest restaurant in town, you can find Shanice volunteering as PR and Communications Chair for NOMA Nashville. Thank you, Shanice. And she is also my co-director of programming here at Nashville Design Week this year. We've had a great time planning this out. So I will exit from stage and I will give these wonderful speakers the opportunity to have the conversation. Enjoy.
Thank you. Sweet. Thanks so much, Manny. And again, thanks to our panelists for tuning in so early on a Thursday morning. We're really excited to have this conversation. I just want to reiterate, the people that we have here on the screen with you are representing different regions of the United States, as well as different, sectors and professions within design. So you guys will hear a snippet of various perspectives, but all, relating back to the perspective of a person of color within the design industry. So just to hop into it, Mustafa, can you please, get us started and kick us off with what defines good design for you? And also, what are the basics of design when you're, starting your project or, starting your design process in general?
Yeah, for sure. So hi, everyone. Again, I'm an architect up in Chicago. So really, when I think of design in general, basics of design, it's really just about creating a solution for a problem. Right. You know, we have a client that comes to us and says, hey, I have this issue. I need you to create the problem. Create the solution. Right. And so that's the basic. Right. You know, problem, solution. But then when you go into good design, that's when you really start to go above and beyond. It's like, yes, I'm solving for that one problem, but I'm also making sure that I'm not creating other issues, haphazardly. I am thinking about issues that the client may not have even thought about at all, but you're solving for that as well. I like to give the example of if a client comes to me and says, hey, I need office space, right? I need just a big old open space for my employees to work. I could just design a simple box with workstations and cubicles. Boom, there you go. There's your solution, right? But good design goes into, all right, well, I want the space to be beautiful. I want people to feel like they want to come to work here. I want to make this, if it's an office building, I want to create some public spaces for the public, people that aren't even going to work here, but they can also enjoy that beautiful design as well. So like I said, it goes above and beyond the initial problem and tries to solve for, things later down the road, and also tries not to cause any other issues for others that may not be a part of the initial conversation.
Okay, thanks for that. And I guess also to piggyback off of, what is good design? How do you think that will look in the future? Do you think it will differ? And I guess how so?
I think it will. I think it'll differ in a way that I think the conversations on what the over and above is will start to change a little bit. I think the idea. Right now, the idea of beautiful design is. In my profession, it's part of the basics of design, right? We're not going to just go out there and design a box. But then the over and above is, and the future of design is like, okay, is it inclusive, right? Is it actually welcoming for everybody? We have the American Disabilities Act that makes sure everything's accessible for no matter, what type of condition a person is that's about to go into a space. But then there's also the next level of, okay, are we representing different cultures in this design? Are we, we're not making it very Eurocentric and just for, our one client, but what about all the different cultures and people that are going to come and enjoy this space? Are they actually going to enjoy it? So I think that's what the future of design is going to be. It's going to be more accessible. It's going to be more inclusive. It's going to have that feeling of belonging and that welcome feeling to no matter who comes in and participates in the space.
All right, thanks for that. So I guess from your perspective, and I guess I'm gonna gear this towards you, Joe, as a filmmaker, and then also just from what Manny read, your background, as a person of color, what obstacles are you currently facing or have you faced that you didn't think would be a factor? And then also, how are you coping with that within the design industry?
Yeah, I grew up in a just extremely diverse community in the Bay Area in California. Just being around all sorts of people was a very normal thing to me. And coming to Nashville, I found myself feeling a lot more isolated than I would have thought I would, and kind of myself uh, unintentionally trying to compensate for that by like going to the Asian grocery store on Sunday just to kind of feel like I'm around the people I was used to being around each weekend or all the time. And uh, I think isolation was just the biggest obstacle when you look around on a set or something like that, and you realize like you're the only not full white person there. And I don't think it's just with people of color, but like with other creatives, I think finding community, intentionally seeking it out, and finding people who understand your shorthand is just so important, not just for the advice that they could give in the problems that you're facing or the challenges you're trying to overcome, but just knowing that somebody's in the same trenches with you is just so invaluable. I'm part of this creative masterminds group, and they've given me such life-changing advice. But again, just knowing that they feel the same imposter syndrome, they feel the same late invoices or inferiority or the occasional, why don't I just like go become a baker instead, is so comforting. No matter what or how much I didn't want to go that morning, I always leave like ready to completely just run through a wall and get back to my desk.
I can totally relate. I attended school at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and came back to Nashville. And I'm just, I guess, being the only person of color within the firm at the time, I was looking for a sense of community as well. And I found that in NOMA, of the National Organization of Minority Architects. And it really helped change my perspective. It helped me get through some of those professional, I guess, speed bumps that I was experiencing. And then also the imposter syndrome. I totally agree with you. You just need someone in your corner saying, no, you got this, you know? So I guess along those same lines, and I guess I'll gear this towards Mustafa and Joe, what triumphs have you been able to achieve or see within the design industry that gets you guys excited and I guess gets you, keeps you wanting to go?
I'll go ahead and start. So, I mean, kind of going off of what you're just saying, Shanice, as far as NOMA, being in iNOMA and the Illinois chapter of NOMA and seeing all of the activities and the ways that we are trying to increase diversity within the industry is very powerful. So there's a kind of a whole movement called Project Pipeline, which is starting all the way from elementary school students and teaching them about architecture and design and getting them just, kind of understanding that it is a career for them and that they can be a betterment for their community through design, starting that early, so it's doing workshops in elementary school. In middle school, it's having the Project Pipeline summer camp and having them come together for 5 days and learn about all the different scales of design, from their house, their neighborhood, all the way up to a city. And then in high school, joining the ACE mentorship program, and then in college being in NOMAS and having connections with professionals and having that camaraderie, especially for students that are at PWIs that feel that imposter syndrome and that sense of loneliness. Groups like NOMAS really help them come together. And then also working all the way up to professional development toward licensure and leadership in a firm and firm ownership, right? So I've been a part of that for 4 or 5 years now, and just seeing the progress that it has made since in my little time being involved in it is really inspiring. I now have seen a student that started in the Project Pipeline summer camp as a middle school student, and she was in middle school before I came up to Chicago. But now she's interning at one of the architecture firms, right? So she is like our example. She's gone through the whole pipeline. So seeing that is really inspiring. The fact that we finally broke 500 Black women architects in the U.S. like a year or two ago. To imagine that there weren't 500 living Black women architects in the U.S. was astounding. So seeing those successes are really inspiring. And then from the design side, it's really just going into your finished project. You spent months, if not years, on this project, and you bled a lot of sweat, a lot of tears, and you see the final product. You hear the end user, the person who's actually going to be using the space every day, come up to you and your team and say, "I love it. Our people love this space. This is amazing. We love coming into work every day because we get to come into this space." Those are the triumphs. Seeing the work that so many people are putting in on the diversity perspective and from the design perspective being successful.
I love, there's like a slight delay when I unmute. I love that. And I honestly, it's the same thing that I was thinking about. It's just, I was so many chances I didn't deserve to be on set, to shadow people, to ask stupid questions. And I think that's a huge thing that I focus on now, is honestly equally important with any of the work that we're working on. It's like holding the door behind you for people to have those same chances, to get to ask the same questions, getting to offer people a place and a chance, a resource is, again, just as important as anything that we're working on. Being transparent about rates and calling out imbalance or disrespect, or even just ignorance about things. I just can think of so many places where as we're eating lunch, I found out that the person next to me got paid a fraction of what I got paid and things like that. And being unapologetically transparent about that is, I think, extremely important. As well as, like, for me, I hate talking about myself, and even like writing like I updated my website this week, and writing a bio about myself was the most painful part of it. Like, I could go through all the work, all the stuff, problems, like talking about me was painful. And I realized that I was able to look at the work without that pain because I had made sure to include so many people that when I talk about the work, I'm talking about them. I'm so excited to share it because I'm like, look what that person shot. Look what my friend John did. Look what Nicola did. Like, all of that is so helpful, and for me personally, but also because it brought other people on set to give them a chance to do the type of work that they're looking to do.
I love that. I guess I really related to what you were saying, just to continue to be unapologetically you. So I guess along those same lines, China, would you be able just to tell us from your perspective and your background, what unique opportunities do BIPOC and just people of color and designers have? This is a twofold question. And then also, what do they bring to the table that is uniquely theirs that others really just don't have or can't relate to?
Um, Hey everyone, I'm China, and I'm the founder of a design studio. I would say that unique opportunities really lie in, similar to what Joe said, is bringing people up with you and kind of leaving a legacy that is beyond yourself. And that's really one of the missions of our studio is, working with other founders and other organizations that are making a change in this world. And so I think that's really important for designers of color. Um, it's not just about, seeing ourselves represented in spaces, but it's also about kind of lifting people up with us. And in terms of, you know, the the opportunities and the kind of work that we have to do is really, telling our stories, and I think that's unique to us. Is we're the only ones that can tell our stories, and we should be telling our stories in these spaces. And so, I think, if anyone out there is having imposter syndrome, that's something to keep in mind. Is like, you're not the only one, and people of color are a global majority, right? So that's kind of a benefit to us as well. It's just about getting your voice heard, I think, as well.
Okay, so I guess also to piggyback off of that, China, do you mind just sharing with us, I guess, what do you think, or what do you think will be one of the most significant barriers that we as people of color will face within the design industry? This can be looking ahead, or maybe something that you've already experienced yourself, and how did you overcome that?
I think we are still facing barriers, and I think that right now we are one of the biggest barriers is that we're complacent with representation, and I don't think it's enough. I think, we should be studio owners, we should be agency owners, we should be owners of architecture firms, and we should be organizing. And so I think that's one of our biggest barriers right now, is kind of moving from representation to actual organizing and ownership and leadership, honestly. And I would say one way actually that, kind of touched on that is we launched a mentorship this year specifically for BIPOC creatives that wanted to start a business or go into freelancing. And it was one of the first times that I had seen any kind of mentorship like that. And so it's definitely needed. And I feel like, again, just lifting others up for the ride is super important to kind of overcome some of those things.
Great, thank you so much. I guess just to piggyback off of what you were saying, I know sometimes we don't have either like the mentorship. So we're not totally sure, I guess, what else besides our education do we need to bring to the table so we do have a seat at the table in the rooms where people are actually making those decisions. So I guess I want to gear this towards you, Irene. What skills do designers and people of color you think need to make sure that they hone in on? And also, do you think that they need to possess or have any skills outside of their distinguished discipline as well?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Shanice. I think so. At first, when I'm hearing skills, you think about design skills when we were taught in school. Okay, what is design? The principles, the elements, and all that, and that you practice those things, and you think you're ready to go out and into the world. But I really want to focus more on the skills that make us human, and that is things like empathy and really listening to others, collaboration skills, like knowing how to work with the people on your team, giving them equal time, listening to them, as well as all the partners in the business. So knowing both sides, the business aspect and also the user aspect, who's your audience. But I really think it all comes down to you. So we asked the question, the theme is what is design? We're thinking about how is design going forward and all that. But I really want to ask the question, who is the designer? And that's something that often doesn't get asked or addressed. And by asking who is the designer, I mean, who are you as a designer? What are your values? What is your intent? And I think that knowing these things really makes you stronger, what you value, because you can't really design for others unless you know what is meaningful to you. So I think that is a skill, to really know who you are, what your boundaries are, what your limitations are. And from there, if you know your limitations, what doesn't feel right, then you can improve on that and know what you need to basically advocate for yourself on. And my job is as a UX designer to advocate for the user. So I'm often, my daily job is to think, okay, how is the user going through this application? Is this easy to use? Is this accessible? Is the content on track? How is the tone? So there are many aspects of design that used to never be addressed. And I'm really heartened by how design is really evolving to include the user, to include more than just the business and the owners, the corporation, but how are people really using the product? And is the user even being heard? So with that, that comes with empathy. How can we relate to the user? So I think these skills of being present and listening are really critical.
I love that. And I guess just to follow up from that, I guess for any of the students that are tuning in, and I guess they're just trying to figure out what are their boundaries, can you speak to that? I guess how do you determine what those boundaries are? Honestly, how do you even determine your voice within your profession as a designer? Like if you're struggling with that, do you have any advice?
I think, well, first of all, I think getting clear about listening to yourself, like really like getting clear and present within yourself is important. So for me, it's kind of like a practice, like what feels right and what doesn't feel right. Because oftentimes you can hear voices externally, what should be, but you have to honor what feels right to you. And your body knows, like what doesn't feel right. And so to be familiar with that is very foundational, I feel. I think that that should be, I think, a code, an underlying code. And if there anything that is crossing that boundary, whatever your values are, your core values, understand, whom should I speak to? If you are in, say, a corporate business environment, whom should I speak to that I can address this? Do I feel comfortable to know, can I speak with my manager? Generally, I work for a corporation. When you on board, there's a certain procedure, and that's usually, I think most companies nowadays have, a certain process that you can report these things, and that's really great. I think now it's how things are, is that the employee is taken care of in that way. It's very clear what you can do in terms of the process of whom you can report these things to. But like I said, I think first of all, it starts with you. What you feel inside is right.
Sweet. I guess I also want to pivot to Joe and also ask him the same thing. As a filmmaker, you have all of these people on set. You have all of these voices. You have the voice of the writer, the screenwriter. You have the voice of the director. I guess how are you able to, disassociate all of those voices and hone into who you truly are as a designer and let that shine through, but also let those who had a hand in the film shine through as well? I guess, how do you create or figure out that merger of all of that?
Yeah, I think it's a lot like what Irene was saying. It all starts with listening. When I was I just updated, like I said, just updated my reel and everything, and realizing that over the last 10 years, though technologies have drastically changed, especially in camera and styles have drastically changed along with the technology and things like that. There was still a very through line that represented the voice that I wanted to have, as far as everything was very empathetic. It was all about the people that were there, especially with me focusing on a lot more documentary style things, which is where I'm comfortable in. I just felt like I was looking at a lot of people who I had become friends with. And I think being able to empower what people think is boring is very important, whether it's somebody in front of or behind the camera. For me personally, I remember expressing this to a friend of my entire life being half Filipino, never felt fully Filipino enough. Being Filipino, never felt Asian enough, and there's that whole stupid argument. And my friend told me that that experience is my culture and is the culture of a lot of people who are second, third generation, people who have to literally have their history, their family, their culture translated to them. And as you grow up, you realize that your parents went through that and their parents went through that, and everyone had to learn who they are and what they came from. And I think that translates so much to even people that we work with. They're stumbling and they're trying to find their place. They have, again, I think imposter syndrome is just going to keep coming up all morning long. We're all going to be trying everything under the sun to try and find what sticks. And I think for so long we feel like that is a schizophrenic type of approach, when really that's just like trying a different tool. You're the core, and empowering people to realize that no matter what tool they're using, they're the unique thing. Whatever they're doing is the most important piece of it all.
Sweet. Thanks, Joe. So we have a few questions from the audience. We're just going to dive right in. This is relating back to what Irene was previously talking about. So Julia asked, can Irene or any of the panelists speak to those moments where, to Irene's point, a project or a team just felt right to your core?
I think, I guess I'll speak to this, that for a project that felt right to my core, I would say that actually this is actually recent. So I was in a conversation with the principal UX lead and the dev people. So in UX, so we're working with developers and engineers, and it was a topic about how to make what we're working on understandable. And it was actually the first time I felt this in a long time, where it felt right, and I was excited because even though, if you're looking like on paper, it didn't seem exciting, but I felt excited by the conversation that we were having, that there was communication, that the developers who make it we were in sync with the designers who saw the vision. And sometimes those things don't necessarily align all the time, because making it and trying to get it on time out there, making these deadlines, sometimes it's not, the developers and design aren't always in alignment. However, I was really excited because of the communication that we both sides were hearing what the needs were, and how it could be built, in an accessible way. So I felt like I was very excited about that.
Thanks, Irene. Joe, Mustafa, or China, do you guys have any projects that you can speak to that really related to your core?
I'll speak to, and I have bounced a little bit between the interior architecture world and the ground up architecture world. So I've worked on some interior workplace projects, and some of them are like tech clients. LinkedIn is one client that I worked with for a while up in Chicago. And the thing about, I don't know if it's just because of tech companies and then wanting to make sure that they attract the youngest, greatest talent, but they really are all about culture and showcasing different cultures in their workspace. So we worked hand in hand with our internal graphic design team and environmental graphics to make sure that, all across this workspace, there are representations from different parts of Chicago, not just the north side, not just the central area, but the west side, the south side, making sure that people just felt like they belonged in that office. And then that translated over to the internal project team, and that we were all just pitching ideas, and some of them stuck, some of them didn't, but even the ones that didn't stick, they weren't shot down. They were just changed and morphed into something better, right? So I think that's part of the, going back earlier to finding your voice. You really want to make sure that the people that's working with you and any managers listening, you want to make sure that the people working underneath you, that they never feel like that they can't come and poach and just present an idea, right? You want them to understand that, like, yes, you may give me an idea. It may not be perfect, but we're going to take that and transform it into something that's actually going to work, right? So that way the person feels like their voice was heard. They feel some sort of, ownership in the design, and they feel proud to be a part of the team. And I learned that just from being that person, starting off young after being an intern and presenting all these crazy ideas. And they're like, okay, we're going to take this and morph into something that's, not as expensive, or, not as, something that's going to be a little bit more realistic, but I still felt ownership in the design. And that project team is just amazing because of that. Like, right, we all work together to make sure that we were, presenting a design to the client that represented their values, but also represented ours.
Yeah, there's like a certain level of trust and respect, right, that comes with teams that actually feel good. And like Irene said too, like radical empathy, we're letting someone have ownership, and even if their ideas didn't come through, still having them feel heard.
So we have another question from the audience, which I believe is piggybacking off of what you guys are saying. Nia asked, for all panelists, as young designers, it's often difficult to trust your own voice or storytelling abilities. So what are some ways you would remind yourself that you got this, and you're right where you need to be?
I can speak on that a little bit. I think storytelling is honestly a skill, and it's a skill that needs to be honed and refined. And, you know, it starts with trusting your own voice for sure and believing that your story should be told. But, you know, also remembering that because we haven't heard our stories told, because we haven't seen ourselves in places, it's very easy to, you know, think that we don't meet the status quo. It's very easy to feel like, you know, we don't belong. And again, yeah, going back to imposter syndrome, like someone else has asked, like it's very easy to feel all of those things. And I think reminding yourself that, am I allowed to cuss on this panel? You know, just reminding yourself that you have power and you have internal strength, and yeah, and if it means that you work on your storytelling skills a little bit, that's fine. But at the core of it, you should know that your story deserves to be told, right? Um, so that's the big reminder, I would say.
Joe, Irene, Mustafa, do you guys have anything to add to it? Or we'll hop right into the next question from the chat.
I think I started it right before I had the rest of the sentence. Honestly, I think that trusting your own voice takes, like China said, hearing your own voice. Whether, like for me, when I'm excited about a story I'm working on or an idea that I have, it takes me at least telling 4 or 5 different people about it, working on that elevator pitch, figuring out the right words to describe the 100 words in my head about it, that it finally takes place, and then I can have the sentence I need to describe it. It's why I think they, I don't know who said it, but they say a film is written 3 times: when it's written, when it's shot, and when it's edited. And I am an absolute mess without editing. And so getting to show things, getting to say things to multiple people, and then figuring out what sticks, what I resonate with, what I want to bring to the next time I show it. Finding the people that you trust with those places is really valuable, and something I would encourage is to just have peers, have mentors, look for people whose work you trust and you see the values that you want to emulate and carry in your own work, and then just badger them, ask them how they did it, show what you're excited about, and try to look for those similar things.
Well, thank you. I guess also to just continue along with the questions that are in the chat, this is to any of the panelists. Along the same lines of imposter syndrome has come up a lot. When those feelings arise, what tools do you use to navigate through those emotions and keep them from derailing your values? I think this is a great question.
Yeah, I would like to address that. I think for me, this imposter syndrome thing is just so real in my mind anyway. And it's something that I deal with on a daily basis right now because I just recently started a new job. And so I'm really faced with that. I faced with it in the technical sense because I'm using software that I'm not familiar with. I'm so old school. You know, I love drawing and painting. That feels really natural to me. So doing this job, it's a little foreign. So the story I tell myself is that it's just trying to like remember, okay, well, there's like there was a process that I got to this place, and I will get it. It just takes time and patience with myself, and that I have other things also to offer that may not be specific to the technical skills, but there are other things that I can bring to the table that are just as valuable, that will add to just what the outcomes are. So I really like what China says about this, your story and being empowering. And I believe that, and everybody has their story, and the fact that we're talking about this and sharing ours is really exciting. So I think for me, it's just remembering like what my skills are, and that I don't need to feel like an imposter.
I'd
Kind of
love to
just,
add.
oh, yeah, go ahead, China.
Oh, a tangible way you can actually do that is to just keep like screenshots of, positive text messages, good feedback from clients, emails. I actually have a folder on my computer. And, when I'm having a bad day or if I'm feeling like a fraud for whatever reason, I'll look back at that folder and just, have something tangible to look at too.
It's a great idea.
That is a great idea. I love that. I think just kind of piggybacking on the piggyback. So I think, going up to Chicago as an intern in college, 300-person firm, like, in the middle of college felt like, wait, how did I get up here? In 2017, I won the Gensler Diversity Scholarship, which allowed for, it was a scholarship and then the internship opportunity, and I chose the Chicago office. When I got up there and I was around all the other interns that had went through interviews and portfolio reviews, and, they went through a longer process than myself to get up there, that was a huge moment of like, do I belong here? Am I like, it felt weird that it felt like I got a shortcut to get up there. Right. But then through mentors and just thinking about my own life, it's like, no. You overcame, poverty, homelessness, couldn't afford college, worked my, sorry for language, ass off in order to make sure that I could stay in school and graduate, without a cent of like student loans or anything, or family money, right? It's all through scholarships and just working as hard as I could in order to get to the position that I was. So I think what it is with the imposter syndrome, you have to like look back and think about, okay, what's all the work that you did to get to this point? Because you didn't just end up in the position that you are. You did a lot of things beforehand, and you went through a whole process. You went through a lot of trials and tribulations in order to get to the position that you are. So you deserve it. You deserve that position. You deserve wherever you are, and you deserve your flowers, right? It's like understand your impact and your value based on where you have been.
Can I just say, even if you had a shortcut, you deserved it. Like, we're so not used to ease, and I think that there are so many white people that get things so easily, and we don't see that for ourselves, and so it's like it can be so uncomfortable. But even if you just shortcutted your way in, like, you deserve that shit.
Exactly.
I totally agree. I think sometimes we expect or look for the struggle, not being default, having things baked into our own culture, especially as people of color in America. I mean, literally everyone, well, not literally, most Americans came to America, but us a lot more recently, or were brought here, or were, anything else. And I think the imposter syndrome can sometimes be baked into our own culture, just like we struggle a lot with ourselves, not knowing our home language or anything about where we came from, things like that. We had to wear clothes to fit in. We had to, like, you couldn't just be what you were. You had to come in and adopt something new. So I think like maybe sometimes the imposter syndrome is expected, just in our bones.
Thanks, guys. I really love all of the insight that you guys are giving. The chat is on fire right now, so we're gonna hop back over to some of those questions. So Emily asked, Mustafa mentioned his involvement in ACE and nuance as helping him strengthen his identity and sense of belonging as a student. This is all open to the group, but are there other ways that educators can encourage or foster this for BIPOC and students of color in design?
I think, especially for educators, I think depending on what type of design it is, I think it's showing examples of BIPOC people in that industry that are succeeding, right? When Shanice and I went to University of Tennessee together. Our professors, when they were teaching architects and designers, there was one person of color, one Black person that they showed as an example. It was David Ajayi, and everybody else was very Eurocentric, right? Or American architects that came from Europe and did projects here. And that if Nomas and Ace weren't a thing, and I wasn't aware that there are others that look like me out there, I probably would have felt a little bit less inspired to continue, because you're not seeing somebody that looks like you in that position, right? So it's hard to imagine yourself in that position in later in your career. So I think it's definitely changing the curriculum. The curriculum needs to change in a lot of design industries to be more open and be more diverse in the education. And then on top of that, I think it's a level of, I can't tell you how many of my friends have had how many of my BIPOC friends have had the one professor or the multiple professors that says, maybe architecture just isn't for you. Maybe this isn't, where you want to be. Maybe you need to switch over to engineering or something else, right? Mm-hmm. And instead of trying to inspire and teach the student to come down to their level to bring them up, they're going the easy way out and just saying, oh, if I can't teach you, clearly you're not ready for this profession, right? So I think it's changing the curriculum and changing the mindset of educators to be more open.
I think that's really important about the education factor. I mean, I think it's really exciting, Mustafa, that you're doing work with kids. That's where it really starts, that they can see that there's a place for them in this industry, architecture, and any other field that might not seem so accessible. But I do think that it's important to see other people like yourself. So bringing in guest speakers, having maybe welcoming or encouraging mentorship, that type of thing, just so that there's just exposure is really, really important.
And I guess also to piggyback off of that, in addition to bringing in the lectures, like Irene is saying, or Mustafa, changing the curriculum, what does your staff look like? I was never taught by someone that looked like me. And that, I think if I did have that opportunity within the College of Architecture, it might have changed my perspective. Mustafa, I definitely had a professor tell me, I don't think architecture is for you. Third year in school, I'm like, well, hey, buddy, I have 2 years left and I'm going to see this through. So yeah, I absolutely echo everything that you guys are saying. So along the lines of still, students and I guess classes and education, Nia asks, what are some ways that peer classes of designers can support and uplift one another? Often we're all on the same or similar playing field, despite being in different firms or studios.
For me, I think it's the thing I've seen that's been most helpful is short and sweet. It's just transparency. Like I said, in that creative group that I'm in, like we've gotten to the place where, and it took a little while because everyone kind of like plays their cards close to the chest, especially as individual freelancers. But we got to a place where we started sharing real numbers about things, and then slowly some people are like, "Wait, I could be making that," or like if you find again a group that you trust or mentors that you trust. Being honest, I think, is the key to that relationship too. Peers that are open with each other can help lift each other up at the lunch table when you find out that somebody isn't making enough as you or as much as you, or certain struggles, how to get invoices from certain clients. Like, we're all in cities, but we all still know and work for a lot of the same projects. Me and all of my friends and I, we write a lot of treatments for the same music videos. And so like we all like, did you get that one? Did you get that one? And then we share that. And I just think that that's really important. What's the word? It's not compensation, but like a way to kind of bring the power back and disperse it amongst each other.
I think that's really great. I think that getting involved in your community is important. So you can, we're so busy with all our jobs and everything, but if there's a way to take an opportunity to get involved in your community to serve, or using design as a platform, that is a terrific way. I live in Rhode Island, and there's Design by RI. They do a design week event every year, and they open it up to, you can submit application, you can do an open studio, you can host an event, you can host a panel discussion. So you can make it, you could actually bring to the table something that is of design and open it to the public. So I think to get involved is a good way.
Thanks, Irene and Joe. Joe, I kind of want to speak to what you were just previously talking about and the transparency between peers. We have a question from the chat from Kaylin. She says, good morning. As a person of color, how do you navigate salary negotiations or pay increase with a client or an employer?
I think in my experience, just because I'm so freelance, I'm not at a place, so it's all a lot of like rock skipping on a pond with the same clients, just meeting up with them every month, is again, in that transparency, when my friends and I are all writing the same, like bidding on the same job, you get details about that job and what one creative director said to one person, but what they said differently to another person. And so hearing that, like, one person said, oh, the budget will probably be around 10, but another person heard it might be like 12 or 13, helps all of us be able to know how much money they actually have to work on something. So then we can all say, this is going to cost about 13 to do, and things like that. To me, from the freelance side, that's been the biggest thing, is just being able to have as much information as possible.
I think on the architecture side, I think it's really, there are ways to find out, about a range of what people are making, and to understand it's like, okay, this person's making around this area. Do I feel like that I have either more experience, or I've been working a little bit more? Do I feel like my value is a little bit more? It's as crazy as it sounds, it almost is. It's almost like a comparison, which can go one or two ways. It can either go really bad or really good, because, was it? I think it's the AIA salary calculator, right? And it gives like a range of salaries per region and per state. So then you can take that and then look at, okay, well, this is the average for all firms. What is my firm doing? What's the type of work that my firm's doing? Are we doing better than most? Can we, afford to pay our employees a little bit more? And that's a really hard conversation to have, especially with your leadership. But what you have to do is just present to them and say, hey, this is what I bring to the table. I do my 8 to 5 work, but I also do this on top of that. That not also brings value to me, but also brings value to the firm. That helps us win more work. That helps us, get paid on time. That helps the bottom dollar, right? So that you have to try and use that as an argument in order to prove why you deserve, a higher salary. And unfortunately, in all industries, it's the way it is, that you almost have to prove yourself why you deserve a higher salary. Some people, if you kind of just go with the standard, cost of living increase, and you don't say anything, that's sometimes what you're going to get. You have to be vocal. You have to speak up for yourself. You have to say, okay, I deserve this, and this is why. right? And just have an open and honest conversation about it.
I think that's a great point, Joe and Mustafa. China, as an owner of your own design firm, I'm interested to hear your perspective from a role of leadership. I guess, how do you navigate that world also?
This is an interesting question because prior to founding the studio, I had no leadership experience. And it's been a way for me to grow into that. But it's also been reaffirming for myself to just kind of remind myself, hey, I'm bringing radical empathy, I'm bringing radical transparency, I'm talking about the numbers. And I was inspired by another studio to publish our entire numbers, our accounting for the whole year. And so we have that on our website. And yeah, I think it's just about bringing those radical values to the forefront, and just growing in leadership because we need more leadership like that. Yeah, so it's a process for sure.
I honestly, I think that's amazing. I'm sure that your employees really appreciated the transparency. I know, just speaking from my experience when COVID hit, our leadership team brought us all together within our large conference room, and we literally went through all of the numbers for the year, the past year, the current year, and targeting the future. And we just really appreciate that transparency because, of course, COVID hit and we were all, what's happening, what's going on. So kudos to you. And I'm sure that's also helping people, other designers, using that as a resource. So thanks for that. We have another question from Kaylin in the chat. She says, have you been presented with a project that drastically does not align with your morals and values? And if so, how did you handle that situation? I think this is a great question.
I would just say, thankfully, I have not had that experience. I've talked to some of my office leadership, and they talk about how they evaluate a project. They evaluate the client. They want to know who this person is. What is this project? Is this a project that fits in our values or not? So thankfully, there's a kind of a filter, I would say, before it gets down to my level. So thankfully, I haven't experienced that.
Yeah, same here. I'm with Ms. Mustafa on that. I haven't, thankfully, experienced such a drastic experience like that.
I think one of the only ones I can think of, it's happened a couple of times, but being asked to work on videos for some political campaigns that I could see can contribute to a larger thing that I disagree with, especially being in Tennessee, or like, not to get into everything, but go vote. It was hard because there is a lot of money in political jobs, and which is another problem. But it was hard to say no to those things, knowing that this candidate would, really work against things that I am passionate about. And I had to respectfully bow out of it. And luckily, I think nowadays people kind of half expect that. Like I'll there's some pretty funny ways that they put it. Like I'm trying to think of one where, like, this campaign's pretty red meat is what somebody put it once. It's like, what? And it took me a while to understand what they meant. But yeah, I think there's respectful ways to bow out of things, but it's gonna hurt because no one likes saying no to money. So I think you just have to be honest with yourself. And honestly, I think a lot of what we've been saying this morning comes from us really having worked on the things that are important and valuable to us. Like, all of these behaviors and efforts come from understanding our values. And that was one of them, that I didn't value money as much as principles or integrity. And I had to follow that if I was going to live up to the things that are important.
China, do you have any perspective or I guess projects that have come up as a founder of your studio that you want to speak to?
We're pretty transparent on our website in terms of what our values are. So I think, there's that filter. But I think it does come down to money and, aligning with that and, aligning with your values and kind of weighing. Sometimes, either as a creative or as a founder, you have to kind of balance that, right? Do I take this on for the cash flow? Do I not take this on? And sometimes, folks don't always have that choice. I mean, before I became a founder, I was working in the pharmaceutical industry, and it's something that I'm not really for. And I quit my job. But sometimes we're forced to live in those situations, and I would never, tell anyone that they're less than for it. But if you get to a point where you're comfortable enough financially to say no to those kinds of projects, then I think, that's obviously preferred. And you kind of walk away gracefully and you say, thanks for the opportunity, but, we don't align. And I think that's okay too. That's what we do. And it's really nice to actually have a surplus of clients that want to work with someone that aligns with their values, because it's very hard to find, actually, especially in web design. So thankfully we don't really have that problem, but it happens for sure.
Thanks, guys. I'm gonna continue to ask you guys these questions from the chat because they keep rolling in. So Derek, is asking all the panelists, do you mind speaking to your experiences showing up authentically in white spaces? What advice would you give to creatives or BIPOC professionals when navigating these experiences?
I have just one, and I'll try to keep it short, but like it's honestly a little bit of a what not to do type of a thing. When I was a lot younger, like I think I really had to come into really valuing who I was and what I had come from. And when I was younger, I think I used to let a lot of people and myself trivialize me being different. People would introduce me as their Filipino friend or, whatever else. And I thought it was cute and I felt like short round and like whatever. And then realizing now, like I would be furious if somebody did that now. And I think standing up for not necessarily standing up for yourself and being combative in the moment, but like you aren't the token person, you are a person. You deserve to be there as much, if not more than they do. And not letting yourself be an ornament on the Christmas tree is, I think, really important. You're not there to meet a standard or to tick a box. Like, ideally, you were hired because you can do this job, and so you carry yourself accordingly. I'm not trying to be combative now. I'm just realizing I've been thinking a lot about that in my past, and just like, God, I wish I handled that differently. I wish I didn't let myself be a trinket.
I'd love to add. Oh, go ahead, Irene.
Thanks. I just wanted to say that also, kind of like what Joe was saying, like thinking back on my past. So I grew up in a very diverse place in Hawaii, and I lived in New York and worked in New York City for a long time. But in between those two places, I went to school in Utah, and that was like the first time I really experienced what it was like to live and be in a place that was predominantly didn't look like me and was predominantly white. And I think that's when I became really conscious of to be in an environment where I didn't necessarily feel like I fit in. And it wasn't like it was an outwardly thing where I was put down or anything, but I was very aware that I was, I guess, different outwardly. But I was also looking inward because I felt very intimidated and insecure. I felt like I had to work doubly hard in a way to show that I was as good as, and that was because maybe when I grew up, I mean, this is historically, this is like going back, like feeling maybe um, less than, like the white counterpart. And so um, it was basically feeling intimidated, but then kind of growing past that just by working and feeling confident in my own self and my own skills. That I think I was able to, get not quite past, but I guess become more aware. And now, having gone through that, I also have a lot of empathy. I've taught for several years, and seeing that in the school system, seeing that in public school, and trying to also like be supportive of my students who might be going through something like that.
Yeah, the advice I would give kind of rides on that too. It's just if you're navigating those experiences, look out for your mental health, because imposter syndrome, burnout, microaggressions, all of that are very real things that happen. And, looking out for yourself is really important, because I think a lot of us kind of take it on as, oh, I'm feeling inferior, I'm feeling out of place, or I don't have community. But the reality is that we've been excluded from these spaces. Like, we've been, intentionally excluded. And the civil rights movement wasn't that long ago also. And so it's like we kind of forget these things, and we we internalize it. And so, taking care of and looking after your mental health is really important.
Yeah, China, that mental health part is really important, because I think a lot of us realized in 2020, 2021, when the big, quote unquote racial awakening happened, that was a moment of like, okay, everybody's asking me how not to be racist, or how not to this, how to do this. And it's like, I can't be the one to educate you. I can't. You have, like, Google exists, books are there, like, go read some books, go understand the history, and then you'll understand a little bit more about my culture. You understand why we are like we are, right? And it's also understanding that, BIPOC communities are not a monolith, right? Black communities are not a monolith. Not all Black people act the same. So in college, that was, going from, went to school at MLK Magnet with Shanice, and that was a very diverse high school, right? It was still, it was still mostly white, but it was pretty good percentages of other cultures. And then going to University of Tennessee, a PWI, and it was like, okay, right back into, being one of, right? And that was a little tough, because there were some people that, obviously not people I talk to anymore, but that were like, oh, you're not really Black, you don't act Black. And it's like, okay, that was a problem. But that was the ignorance, right? That's the, oh, we only knew that Black people act this way, or Black people look this way, right? And so it's that education that is involved, but it's not your job to educate them. You can only, like, try and direct them to learn more about, your culture, right? And another way to do it is just to be yourself, because if you be yourself every single day, and you act yourself around them, they're going to learn about you. They're going to learn a little bit about your culture, and hopefully there'll be others around, so they'll learn that it's more of a spectrum and not just a monolith also.
I love that. Just be yourself. And that's really the best thing to be.
Yeah, thanks you guys for all giving a different opinion and perspective on that. Going back to the chat, Susan says, I'm working on a design history text that is striving to be more inclusive and diverse. What are your thoughts about moving towards more inclusion? And who are some of your heroes?
I think for me, and this is inclusion in general, not specifically geared toward BIPOC, but I'm just thinking right now, it's in my head about how to show up, and I I think it's about being supportive to, for me in my actual work experience, about being supportive to the people who are trying to make a difference. So, where I recently worked, uh, accessibility design is huge, and they're calling inclusive design now. And so I remember in this meeting, and so the accessibility designer, she, as often they often can put the stop onto getting the project done, because they'll point out, well, this isn't this way, this is really hard to read, or this isn't geared toward people with mobility issues, or maybe their site challenged, or etc. And so it was very clear in this meeting that I was in, that this was that none of the leaders were supporting her. The people on the engineering side, the development side, they were not happy about this. And I felt like I didn't know how to handle it, and I didn't say anything. And after that meeting, I really, I asked myself, like, Irene, you could have said something. This would, she was just out there alone. After that, I really decided that I needed to speak up and be supportive, because, maybe it wouldn't change the course, and maybe my managers would have said, forget it, we still have to go ahead. But just be support and have more people, like, speak up if you see what's right. And after that, I said, no, I'm going to really speak up from now on, to say, okay, this has to be done this way. And even if it's going to mean the business, maybe it's going to have to meet a deadline. But maybe this doesn't really answer the question that the came in the chat, but that came into mind about how to basically maybe make a change in that regard.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Irene. I'll say from my experience and perspective, one of the changes that I guess presented to the firm, being, well, at one point being the only person of color there, they continued to bring up, well, we don't know where to look. And so I was like, well, okay, well, let me tell you, majority of the BIPOC students that graduate from architecture programs come from HBCUs. Why aren't we going to their expos? Why aren't we going to their student fairs? Here's a list of HBCUs that are accredited programs. Let's go. Like, what? Let's not wait for them to come to us. Let's go to them. I think that's another, I guess, another thing that we could do, moving towards more inclusion. I guess helping leadership or I guess pushing them towards more resources. But it also goes back to Mustafa's point, it's not our job. So I think I'm here struggling between, what's appropriate, what do I have time for? Joe, China, do you guys have any perspective or anything to speak to, I guess, making places more inclusive?
I think having diverse voices be a part of the decision making is very important. So, like Shani said, like, you're a part of that team and you're able to guide them. I think we need more folks creating space for diverse voices, and that's really important, because you can try to make anything inclusive, but if you don't have someone with you who actually understands, it's very hard to speak for other people. So I think that's really important, just having folks on the team.
Yeah, I think the more the more diversity and people that are there, the more ground that can be covered for looking out for things. One of the first questions China asked when we met up a week ago was, will there be closed captioning? You know, like you have, the more eyes you have and the more experiences that they have and diversity that they all come to the table with, the more people that will be thought of in the project, in the presentation, and in anything. Talk about, I was trying to think of like pillars and people that like the Beethovens, Ansel Adams type of people, but obviously in history it's a very Eurocentric type of voices that rose to the top. But thinking recently within the last 20 years, I have two. One is a little odd, but this director named Justin Lin, he, I think, is most famous for Fast and Furious movies, but one of his first movies was about these suburban Asian kids that stole SAT scores to try and, with all the pressures that they were under to try and do well on these tests, showing that we could be mischievous and not perfect. And all of this stuff was so important, even way back in 2004, 3 or 4, when it first came out. I loved the idea that the other Asian kids were getting in trouble too, because it doesn't, no, everyone sweeps that stuff under the rug. And another is somebody I mentioned earlier about Malika Gharib. She's this illustrator and writer that she's got a couple books out. Her most recent one is called It Won't Always Be Like This. And she's this half Filipino, half Egyptian woman who was the one who told me that like your experience of not being blank enough is the culture you come from and is something worth being shared and told. And both of her books are about that, her feeling not Egyptian enough, her first book is called I Was Their American Dream, about her immigrant parents and family coming here and that she represents what they came here for. And I just think people who can voice those experiences are the heroes to me, because I think we have a very traditional type of story and success story or struggle story as well. But there is a lot more to explore and a lot more that we've done to each other and all of that deserves to be shared and learned from.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate that. This discussion has been amazing. We have 7 minutes left. So I want to ask one more question just to end, I guess, on a high note. And this is to everyone. I would love to hear from each of you. What positive steps do you see in the industry? And how do we keep the momentum going?
So I'll say for the, on my side of the architecture and design industry, it really is the increased effort toward increasing diversity. So Shanice, to your point earlier about, there were conversations when they were looking at the numbers and saying, okay, we're doing not as good as we need to be and as good as we want to be on the persons of color in our firm. And it was a statement of, are we going to be able to get, great portfolios? Are we going to be able to get, then there was the same thing of, we're not getting as many applicants that are persons of color, right? And same thing, somebody said, no, go to the HBCUs, go to the schools that you're not going to already. We're going to the Michigan and the Penn and the UPenn and the, Cornells, but, start going to the Howard, start going to, the HBCUs and the schools that have the persons of color. So now we have, a whole design studio series where we actually partner with HBCUs and join their studios, right? So we join their studios as like guest reviewers and help the students throughout the semester. We have increased, now we have not just the diversity scholarship, it's the Gensler Rising Black Designer Scholarship, right? And even in that application, we open that up to where it's not just portfolios, right? We allow them to do a sketch. We allow them to write. We, ask them to send resumes. So it's all these other areas that are not just centered on a portfolio, because sometimes students in, certain communities, they may not be able to develop a beautiful portfolio out of InDesign that is stunning compared to, portfolios from other schools or other students. So it's about really expanding the opportunities and expanding the ways that they can represent themselves to a recruiter, to a potential employer. So all those things are changing, and, the process, of course, is not as going as fast as anybody wants it to be, but it's working, and it's increasing, and I'm seeing the positive change there. And then really to my point earlier about, inclusivity and just understanding that that is now a basis of design, that is like automatically included. It's not, oh, are we making sure we're following ADA guidelines? It's like, no, this is already embedded in the project. Now it's moving up to the cultural and the representation in the design, not just, are the hallways wide enough? Are the stairs wide enough? And things like that. So I think it's seeing that the industry is pushing forward to be more inclusive and more approachable and more welcoming, is pretty inspiring.
I would say even this panel is really positive. I mean, the fact that, there's space to be comfortable having these conversations, that's really important. And I think it's a sign of positive steps for sure.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with China. Just having this conversation is really, really great. I also want to say that what's really exciting to me is just the young designers just coming into the field, and actually in college, even I was able to just be a guest mentor at RISD, and just seeing the caliber of work and not even just the work, but the passion that these young students have, that they are really aware, and so that they really want to make a change through sustainability, through equity, inclusion, and social justice. They're just really just dedicated to that. I feel so encouraged and happy about that. And I've heard this from a former colleague of mine who teaches at Parsons and Pratt, and what he said about the students nowadays, it's just unbelievable. So I feel really very positive about our future in that regard.
Yeah, I think just echoing, I think what we've all been saying in one way or another over the last bit is just intentionality is, I don't know if it's necessarily new, if I'm just growing up and enough to be able to see it, but like it does feel like it's not just an affirmative action. In a lot of places it still is, but like in a lot of the places and people that I work with, it's a value. It's something special, and it's not just a quota to meet or something that they won't get in trouble for. And I think being in places that value that, being intentional to seek that out for yourself, and also being intentional about finding people who will understand you, whether they're white or other people of color. Like I've been so lucky to be in a couple of different writing groups this year alone that was like specifically looking for writers that were people of color, so that we didn't have to waste time on our Tuesday nights or whatever, whenever we met, talking about explaining what we were writing about. Like we all knew exactly those things. And so forums like this, I totally agree, are just so important because we can get right to it.
Well, I just want to take the time to thank each of you for joining us today. I really appreciated the dialogue that we had, the different perspectives, how you guys are representing different regions within the United States, and also the different professions within design. So shout out to you guys. Thank you so much for allowing us to continue to push this conversation forward. Thank you everyone that is tuned in and also dropped questions in the chat. I hope you guys are able to move forward and we're able to continue to make progress within what we discussed today. So again, thanks Irene, thanks Joe, thanks Mustafa, thanks China. Good morning, everyone, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of Design Week.
And thank you, Shanice.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, guys.